I am Hannah, 36, and I ironed my navy dress twice before my sister's engagement dinner. Tonight, the restaurant glowed like a promise I wanted to believe. My parents carried a velvet box. I carried breath I did not want anyone to hear. When did I become the daughter who expects less and tries harder? A thin ribbon on a coffee maker flickered in my memory like a warning. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Please like and subscribe and stay with me. I wanted the night to be simple celebration, not a mirror I could no longer avoid. The host led us to a corner banquette, where the wall held framed sketches of vineyards and the tablecloth was white like snow. A single candle waited with a crooked wick. I noticed the velvet box near my mother's elbow as if it had its own gravity. The room smelled of basil and warm bread. Somewhere behind us, a piano moved through a slow standard that made conversation sound softer than it was. We ordered family style. Madison discussed venues and color palettes and the possible month. Ethan listed practical items, parking, lighting, rain plan. I kept my questions easy, offering help with a seating chart and a playlist, because details have always made me feel useful. My father lifted the water pitcher and filled Madison's glass first. My mother reached across to straighten her necklace, a gesture so natural it hardly registered, until I felt the emptiness where that gesture had never landed on me. When the breadbasket arrived, steam rose like a curtain parting. I asked about guest numbers and offered to draft an outline for speeches, careful to leave room for everyone. Hope did not feel foolish yet. It felt like a small blue flame I cupped in my hands. The last time I wore a dress that tried to behave, I married Caleb in a city park under half a dozen paper lanterns strung between maples. We stood near a picnic shelter that smelled faintly of rain and charcoal. My parents arrived with a coffee maker wrapped in thin gold ribbon. I remember the little bow, the way it slid on the box as if it were not sure where to sit. I smiled and placed it on the gift table between a casserole dish from my friend Ava and an envelope with $50 from a cousin I rarely see. At this table now, small habits glinted like coins on the bottom of a shallow stream. My father called Madison our bright star. My mother asked if the appetizers would be too spicy for her. When I offered to call the florist, my mother nodded without looking at me. The velvet box stayed by her elbow, like a secret that had already picked its audience. I opened the menu and saw prices that made me instinctively calculate the way you do when your mind has learned the shape of careful. I settled on a modest entree and folded the menu so I would stop counting. The candle's crooked wick leaned. I turned it a fraction so it would not drip on the cloth. My mother saw the movement and smiled as if I had done something resourceful. For a second, I thought that smile was a key. At one point, she looked straight at me and said, "You always take care of others, Hannah. We see you." The sentence landed like a warm coat handed at the wrong season. I wanted that sentence to be enough. "Let's make tonight special," my mother said, patting the velvet box with her fingers. Her voice was light, the kind she uses when she wants to float over anything heavy. I lifted my water glass. The condensation cooled my palm. I did not understand what special meant until the velvet hinge opened. Appetizers cleared the room, tilted into a hush that tells you something rehearsed is about to happen. My mother lifted the velvet box and set it in the middle of the table. Her fingers lingered on the hinge. My father cleared his throat the way he does when he wants authority to sound like love. He opened the box. Inside sat a neat stack of transfer papers and a slim flash drive tucked into a slot. My father announced a gift of company shares valued at $1.2 million seed for a first home and future. A couple at the next table clapped. Ethan's eyes went wide, grateful and anxious at the same time. Madison covered her mouth, then reached for our parents. My mother said that their CPA would handle the details and that the lifetime exemption paperwork was already in progress. I gripped my water glass. Condensation slid to the base and made a clear ring on the cloth. I shifted the glass and watched the ring fade. My smile kept its shape. My chest did not. I told Madison congratulations and meant it. I told Ethan he would make a careful partner and meant that too. Meaning and ache are not enemies. They sit side by side on the same bench and both look forward. A string of small films played in my mind. The summer Madison went to a private camp with a lake while I worked afternoons at the grocery store buying my own shoes for senior year. The fall I drove her to test prep after school and waited in the parking lot with a thermos because gas money was tight. The day our father said we will make it fair later in a voice that sounded like a promissory note. Madison hugged each parent. My mother smoothed her hair and said, "We did not want a scene at the wedding registry like last time," which made a few heads turn, though the words were soft. I understood the little jab. That coffee maker again holding more story than it deserved. I excused myself and found the bathroom near the service door. I washed my hands and watched the mirror steam at the edges. I pressed the dress at the seams as if fabric could teach my body how to stand. Outside the stall, a waitress laughed, not unkindly, just a sound that belonged to someone else's ease. When I returned, a birthday song rose from across the room for a stranger whose friends cheered with real joy. I ate slowly and let the song pass through me. Anonymous and visible at once, that is how the night found me. Nothing broke, but something tilted inside me. I breathed once, careful, slowly. My father lifted his glass and said, "You know we love you both." I answered, "Of course," and felt the words skim the surface like a flat stone that refuses to sink. The hinge had opened. It just was not a door I could walk through. On the drive home, the ribbon from my wedding flickered brighter than the streetlights. Caleb came home with the smell of fryers in his sleeves and the kind of fatigue that makes you practical. He listened without interrupting while I told him about the velvet box, and the applause, and the number that sat in the center of the table like a full moon. He put his hand on the counter next to mine, not on top of it, as if to keep me company without steering. We ate leftover pasta. The box fan hummed through the open window and steadied the room. When I finished talking, he asked the question he always asks when something hurts. "What do you need next?" "I need proof," I said. "Not to weaponize, to see." I pulled a yellow legal pad from the drawer and wrote a title at the top. The Ledger. Underneath, I made 4 columns with simple names and plenty of blank lines. Time, money, opportunity, words. The paper smelled faintly of ink, which felt like a kind of fresh start. Caleb rinsed dishes while I began to set down my life in rows. Time went first. I wrote about babysitting Madison during our mother's late shifts in high school, making boxed macaroni and checking homework. I added the winter I stayed overnight at the hospital when our father had his knee replaced so our mother could sleep. I wrote the Saturday mornings in bleachers at Madison's soccer games. Money came next. I wrote $2,500 to cover Madison's rent in 2013 when she was between jobs. I wrote $800 for a dentist bill when her crown cracked. I wrote $300 for the emergency flight when our grandmother died and our parents were too shaken to use a computer. I attached bank statements so no one could call them stories. Opportunity. I wrote the graduate counseling program I deferred when our parents' small business dipped and I moved back home for a season to help with inventory and invoices. I wrote the promotion I did not take at the shelter because I could not promise weekend hours while driving our father to physical therapy. I wrote the conference I skipped because Madison needed a co-signer for her first car, and the insurance mess after a fender bender that swallowed 2 weeks. Words. I printed and slid into a plastic sleeve the text where my mother wrote, "I owe you one," after I took their calls during a messy family disagreement about a will. I printed the message from my father that said, "We will make it fair later," with the date stamped across the bottom. I added notes from my journal. Caleb dried his hands and read a few lines. "Facts are your friend," he said. "So is your voice." I nodded. "I will not weaponize a night that belongs to someone else," I said. "Tomorrow I will ask for a table that belongs to me." Caleb suggested a calm talk. I rehearsed one sentence until it fit my mouth. "I am not asking for a spectacle. I am asking for sight." I placed the pages into a slim binder and added tabs for each column. I slid it into my tote and tested the weight on my shoulder. Not light, not crushing. True. Morning came with the paper smelling faintly of ink and resolve for me. The cafe I chose sat on a quiet corner with a front window draped by fern leaves that made patches of light on the tables. I arrived early and ordered plain coffee, the simple kind that gives you something to hold without asking for more. I picked a two-seat table near the back where voices came gentle. I texted my parents, "Thank you for meeting me. I want to talk quietly about last night and a few things that go back years." When they walked in, my mother wore a light sweater and a public smile. My father looked tired in a way I understood even without liking it. "Thank you for coming," I said, standing so I could choose calm. "Congratulations again. Madison's news is good news." We sat. I placed the binder on the table and rested my palm. I told them what I would not do. I would not try to undo last night. I would not turn an engagement into a trial. I would not make a scene. I want to talk about a long pattern and how we can agree on fair ground from here. I opened the binder and moved through the tabs. Time, money, opportunity, words. I kept each line attached to a date or a receipt. Babysitting during late shifts. Overnight hospital notes when the knee surgery took our breath. $2,500 for rent in 2013. $800 for a crown. $300 for a flight when grief made computers impossible. The deferred program. The skipped promotion. The cosigner line and the insurance calls. The texts that promised fairness and the ones that thanked me without counting. I paused and said I loved my sister and was happy for her. I wanted that sentence to sit in the middle of the table while everything else settled around it. Then I told them what I needed now. I listed options, any one of which I could accept. Option 1. A clear written plan for equitable support over the next 2 years that includes tuition assistance so I can restart my counseling program in the fall. Option 2. A transfer of a smaller portion of shares or equivalent funds to recognize past contributions and set a fair course. Option 3. At the least, a commitment to stop treating me as the on-call, unpaid coordinator for family needs, unless asked and compensated in time or money. That includes event planning for the engagement party and the wedding itself. I can share vendor contacts and notes, but I will not carry it by default. I said the most important request out loud. I would like acknowledgement and repair, not a gesture for pictures. I would like a plan, not a display. My father took a slow breath and studied the binder the way he studies a repair manual for parts he has never handled. My mother bristled a little and talked about timing and appearances and how this could complicate the season. "You could have waited," she said. "I have been waiting since 2010, I said. "That is why I asked for coffee and daylight. This is not a spectacle, it is a table." I watched her rearrange her napkin, then flatten it. When I opened the tab labeled words, my mother finally stopped arranging her napkin. The cafe held its steady quiet, the kind that lets truth sound plain. I turned the binder to the tab labeled words. Inside the sleeve were prints of messages, dates lined in small type. I read them without heat. "Here is the text where you wrote, 'I owe you one,'" I said to my mother. It was after I handled the calls during the family argument about the will. "Here's the message where you dad wrote, 'We will make it fair later.' The date stamps sit right here." I said the words as if I were reading a grocery list, not to drain meaning, but to keep it from overrunning the table. "There is one more thing I have not said," I continued. "I covered quietly for Madison in her early 20s when a night went sideways. I paid for an attorney consult so her name would be protected while she steadied. I did not want you to find out that way. I did it because I loved her. I still do." I closed the sleeve and rested my hand on the binder. "If the measure is love, show me where mine shows." My mother reached for a familiar script. I could see the first words forming something about intention, and seasons, and who needs what when. Her hand on the napkin paused. The script did not arrive. She looked at my face as if she had not looked there in a long time. The words did not come. Her silence was not cruel. It was a door left open to air. My father straightened not all the way, just enough to change the angle of the moment. The shares, he said, came from an early investment windfall. We thought helping Madison into a home first would be practical. We did not weigh the pattern. He closed his eyes and opened them again. "I am sorry." I nodded. "Here is what I need," I said, and slid a single sheet forward with 3 clean points already written. A written plan within 2 weeks, including tuition support this fall, or an equivalent smaller transfer over time. If neither, I step back from unpaid family duties. That includes vendor management and logistics for the engagement party and the wedding. I will send you my contacts so you are not stranded. After that, I recover my time. My mother managed only 4 words. We need more time. Her voice was small, but the room did not shrink with it. You already had years, I said. I said it evenly so she would hear the sentence and not the echo. I left a copy of the binder on the table and slid the original back into my tote. No raised voice, no scene. Only the quiet accounting of what had already been spent and what I would not spend again. My father reached for the binder copy and held it like something fragile that would teach him as long as he did not put it down. He nodded once, the kind of nod that admits daylight. We will be in touch this week, he said. I did not feel taller, only correctly measured, like a picture finally hung straight on a wall at last. I trusted my footing again today. I walked out into noonlight with no ribbon around my throat. That afternoon I wrote a brief email. Thank you for meeting me. Attached is a PDF of the ledger and the boundary list. I repeated the 2-week date in bold in the document and plain in the body. I wrote that I would be available for one follow-up before the deadline, and that after that I would be stepping back from unpaid roles. Then I did the first steady thing. I stepped back from maid of honor duties with a polite message to Madison and Ethan. I sent them a list of vendors I had contacted. I canceled a cake tasting I had scheduled and forwarded the refundable deposit to Madison with a line. This belongs to your plan now. My phone lit up before dinner. Madison's name pulsed. When I answered, her voice was sharp with hurt. You are ruining my season, she said. Everyone will think things about us. I let her speak without interrupting. When she stopped, I used the script I had written in my head on the walk home. I love you, I said. I am stepping back until a plan is in writing. I will be at your engagement party, and I will be kind. I will not carry what is not mine. At work the next morning, I met with my supervisor and asked about tuition aid for a fall certificate in counseling skills. The shelter had a small fund for continuing education. We filled out forms together in the break room. On my way home, I bought a used espresso machine from a neighbor who was moving. I carried it up the stairs like a small promise I could keep. Caleb noticed the difference before I found words for it. Your shoulders, he said. Lighter. We planned a short weekend hike on a trail by the river. I wanted my body to remember movement that was not about leaving rooms to breathe. Midweek, my father left a voicemail. He apologized again, not as performance, but in the bare way a person speaks when they have put down what they were defending. He asked to meet without performances. His phrase echoed mine in a way that made me hope and guard at once. We met at the same cafe earlier when light slanted across the floor. He brought a manila folder with preliminary notes from their CPA. Options were outlined in plain language: a smaller share transfer or equivalent cash over time, tuition support now with a transfer receipt sent to the program by the end of the week. He acknowledged the emotional debt in clear words. We were wrong to call it pragmatism. We were wrong to let you carry the extras. I accepted the tuition support and a modest plan tied to dates and amounts. I declined any photos or posts about it. This is not a ribbon, I said. This is repair. That evening, I wrote Madison a letter on paper because I did not want the tone of text bubbles. I wrote that I wanted sisterhood without debt. I said I would come to the engagement party for 1 hour on time and present and quiet. No speeches. On the night of the party, I wore the navy dress and left the iron in the closet. Truly. The garden venue smelled like cut grass and sugared fruit. White lanterns lined a path and a trio played songs everyone knows by the second verse. I arrived on time in the same navy dress and felt no need to check the seams. I kept to the edges, helped a guest find the restrooms, and let servers pass with trays and laughter. I gave Madison and Ethan a simple kitchen gift wrapped without a bow. Madison hugged me. I hugged her back. We stood a moment, 2 women with the same childhood and different stories. When we parted, relief and something like apology crossed her face. I let both pass. Near the hydrangeas, my mother found me. Evening light made the petals look like folded envelopes. She said she would attend the planning meeting with my father and send the written plan by the date we set. She did not explain last week. I thanked her for the plan and let the promise stand on its own legs. I stayed for 1 hour as I said I would. I let myself enjoy what I could. A brief toast. A cousin dropping a plate and strangers cheering. The trio playing a song my body remembered from rides with my father. A small breeze that kept the night from feeling posed. When the hour closed, I said quiet goodbyes and walked to the lot. I drove home on familiar roads and did not look back. In the apartment, Caleb asked how it went. Easy enough, I said. He handed me water and did not ask for a speech. 2 days later, the email arrived with a plain subject line. The plan was attached with dates and amounts and an enrollment confirmation for my fall program already processed. One line from my mother read, "I prioritized appearances over balance. I will do it differently." I saved the file and closed the computer and stood by the window until my pulse slowed. I set 3 rules for myself on an index card taped inside the kitchen cabinet where I keep the coffee. Say yes when I want to. Say no when I do not. Do not explain beyond 1 sentence. I placed the card behind the filters so I would see it every morning. At first light the next day, I brewed coffee in the second-hand machine and carried the mug to the balcony. I opened the binder on my lap and turned to 2 blank pages. I wrote 2 titles: What I Keep, What I Release. What I keep: love that does not borrow my mornings, a voice that does not shake. What I release: invisible jobs, quiet resentments, the hope that they will guess right without being told. The navy dress hung unpressed on a chair. In the desk drawer, the thin ribbon from the wedding box lay in a small coil. It was just fabric now. I could tie herbs with it or leave it where it is. I do not expect equal confetti. I want equal sight. It is arriving the way morning does, without applause, just certain. Your stories help others feel less alone, and I read every note with care and quiet attention. Before we close, I want to ask you something. Have you ever kept a quiet ledger and then written it down? What changed for you? If this story met you where you are, please comment, like, subscribe, and share so it can find someone who needs it. Thank you for listening with care today. I wish you steadiness and a morning that keeps its promise.